The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Elizabeth Parker. The words hung in the air like suspended crystals. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The judge continued speaking, something about repayment schedules and legal fees, but all I could focus on was Victoria's face across the courtroom. Her perfect mask finally cracked, revealing pure, undiluted shock. This wasn't how family was supposed to end up. Not in a courthouse. Not as adversaries. As I gathered my papers, Victoria's voice cut through the murmurs. "You'll regret this, Liz. Family doesn't do this to family." I looked directly into her eyes, those eyes that had manipulated everyone around her for decades, and felt a strange calm wash over me. "No, Vicky. Family doesn't steal $12,000 from family." She stormed out, her designer heels clicking angrily against the marble floor. At 52, I had finally learned to stand my ground. The price had been high, possibly my husband's family relationships, but as I clutched the folder containing what remained of my dream, I knew it had been worth it. My name is Elizabeth Parker, and this is how I reclaimed the second chapter of my life. Flashback. 3 months earlier. "Stop being so dramatic, Liz." "It's just money," Victoria said, waving her perfectly manicured hand dismissively. She lounged at my kitchen table, sipping the herbal tea I'd made from my garden herbs, though her grimace suggested she would have preferred something more exotic. I gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. $12,000 isn't just money, Vicky. That was my future. 20 years of teaching, putting aside a little each month for my dream. And it was an emergency, she insisted, flicking invisible lint from her new cashmere sweater. This treatment was essential. "You don't understand what it's like watching youth slip away." The wall behind her held my teaching retirement plaque, 20 years at Lincoln High School, a chapter of my life I'd closed early to pursue my dream of opening a bookstore cafe. A dream that was now in jeopardy because I'd trusted my sister-in-law. "You said it was for overdue medical bills and possible eviction," I said, my voice steely calm despite the rage building inside me. "Not cosmetic procedures and shopping sprees. Aging is a medical condition," she smirked. "And appearances matter in my circles." Through the window, I could see the boxes of antique books I'd been collecting. Second chapter. That's what I was going to call my cafe. A place where people could find both literature and peace, where the second half of life could be celebrated rather than mourned. "I want my money back, Victoria." She stood, smoothing her designer jeans. "I'll pay you back when I can. Don't make this a big deal. It's not like you can't save it again." She paused at the door. "At your age, what's another 5 years anyway?" That was the last straw. As she sauntered out, I felt something shift inside me, decades of accommodation crystallizing into resolve. At 52, I didn't have 5 more years to waste. This wasn't over. Flashback. The family dynamics. Richard didn't know about the money yet. My husband of 25 years had always been caught between his sister and me, and I'd spent most of our marriage trying not to force him to choose sides. I still remember the day I met the Reynolds family, how Victoria had commanded the room, how their parents had smiled indulgently at her every whim. Richard had explained it later. "She's the baby of the family. Kevin and I were expected to be responsible, but Vicky was special." Special. The word had taken on a bitter taste over the years. That night, as Richard and I prepared for bed, I finally told him. Vicky spent the money on cosmetic procedures and a shopping spree, not medical bills. He sat heavily on the edge of our bed, the reading glasses in his hand suddenly forgotten. "What?" "But she said." "She lied," I said simply, my voice surprisingly steady. "And I'm not letting her get away with it this time." Richard rubbed his temples, a gesture I'd seen countless times when his sister was involved. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm going to ask her to return it. If she refuses." I let the sentence hang. "She's my sister, Liz," he said softly, his voice tinged with the familiar plea. This could get messy. 25 years ago, I might have backed down. 10 years ago, I probably would have found a way to smooth things over. But now, with my retirement savings depleted and the precious years ahead dwindling, I couldn't afford to be the peacekeeper anymore. "I know she's your sister," I said, picking up the notebook from my nightstand. the one filled with cafe plans and dreams. But this is my life too. I gave up teaching early to pursue this dream. We don't have children, Richard. This cafe is my legacy. He was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he reached over and took my hand. You're right. It's just old habits. I know. We sat there in the dim light, both acutely aware that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in our marriage, Richard would have to choose, not between his sister and his wife, but between enabling dysfunction and supporting growth. At the kitchen table, the next morning light streamed through the windows as I sat at our kitchen table, staring at the spreadsheet that had once represented my hopes. Every dollar had been carefully accounted for. Tutoring sessions after school, summer school teaching, the inheritance from my mother, years of birthdays when Richard had contributed to my cafe fund instead of buying gifts. Richard set a coffee mug in front of me, the one his woodworking class had made with second chapter already painted on the side. His early gift for the cafe that might never be. I support whatever you decide, he said, sitting across from me. But I need to understand what you're thinking. I took a deep breath. This isn't just about the money, Richard. It's about respect. About the value of my time and my dreams. I understand that. But do you? I interrupted, surprising us both. When your mother turned 60, she told me she felt invisible. That's how Vicky makes me feel, like my time doesn't matter, like my dreams are expendable because I'm past some expiration date. Richard flinched. His mother had passed away 3 years ago, never having pursued her own dream of traveling. I never thought of it that way. At my age, time is more valuable than money, I continued. And Vicky stole both from me. He nodded slowly. So what's the plan? I'm going to call Laura. She knows a good lawyer. The garden bench, phone call with Laura. Laura Thompson had been my best friend since college. After her own divorce, she'd rebuilt her life piece by piece, raising her son alone while managing a law firm. If anyone understood standing up for oneself, it was Laura. I sat on the garden bench my father had built, one of the few things I had left from my childhood home, and dialed her number. She said what? Laura's voice crackled through the phone after I recounted my confrontation with Victoria. That I was being dramatic. That it's just money. That entitled little. Laura cut herself off. Liz, you need to stop playing nice. She's counting on you to roll over again. I know, I sighed, watching a hummingbird hover near my lavender. But suing her? What if it tears Richard's family apart? My own family had been different. My parents, both teachers, had instilled in me the value of education, hard work, and standing up for what's right. They had saved all their lives for a modest retirement, only to have my father's medical bills drain it all away. I'd watched my mother work well into her 70s as a result. I couldn't, follow that path. Listen to me, Laura said firmly. She stole from you. This isn't about family. It's about accountability. If she didn't want consequences, she shouldn't have taken your money. The hummingbird darted away, reminding me how quickly time passes. You're right, I said finally. I need to do this. Not just for the money, but for me. That's my girl, Laura replied. I'll send you Diane Morgan's number. Best family dispute lawyer in the county. The law office. Legal consultee. Diane Morgan's office was warm and inviting, more like a living room than a legal space. Diplomas and certifications shared wall space with awards from women's organizations and a framed needlepoint that read, Justice, because karma needs a little help sometimes. I placed my folder on her desk. Bank statements, text messages begging for help with urgent medical bills, and screenshots of Victoria's social media showing her shopping sprees and cosmetic procedures, all dated days after receiving my money. So your sister-in-law requested this money under false pretenses and has refused to return it? Diane clarified, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed the documents. Exactly, I replied, fighting the knot in my stomach. She claimed it was for medical emergencies and potential eviction. Instead, she spent it on this. I pointed to an Instagram post where Victoria boasted about her rejuvenation treatment and designer shopping day. You have a strong case, Elizabeth, Diane said, tapping the text messages. These clearly show misrepresentation, and the bank records confirm the transfer. The social media evidence is particularly damning. I never thought I'd be doing this, I admitted. Suing family. Diane removed her glasses, her expression softening. This is very common, especially among women your age. We're raised to be caretakers, peacekeepers. But there comes a point where standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. I nodded, thinking of all the times I'd covered for Victoria, made excuses, stepped aside. And Elizabeth, Diane added, if she's done this to you, chances are she's done it to others in the family as well. The thought hit me like a thunderbolt. Her brother, Richard's older brother Kevin. He's always been bailing her out too. It might be worth having a conversation with him, Diane suggested. As I left her office, I felt a strange mixture of dread and liberation. The lawsuit would create chaos in the family, but for the first time in decades, I was choosing myself. The revelation, Kevin's story. The cafe where I met Kevin was quiet, tucked away from the main streets where we might be seen by mutual acquaintances. Kevin Reynolds had always been the responsible one, the eldest who shouldered family burdens silently. I almost didn't come, he admitted, stirring his black coffee. At 51, his hair had grayed at the temples, and fine lines mapped his face. But when you mentioned Vicky and money, she took my retirement fund, I said simply. $12,000. Claimed it was for medical bills and rent. Kevin's bitter laugh held no humor. Let me guess. She spent it on herself instead? I nodded. She's been doing it for years, he sighed, pulling out his phone. Ever since our parents died, she's been hitting me up too. Just until I get back on my feet. Just this once. Always with some crisis. He showed me text after text, the same pattern, different amounts. Thousands of dollars over the years. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. Family protects family, he said automatically, then grimaced. That's what our parents always said. They covered for her all her life. I guess I just continued the pattern, even at the expense of your own future? Kevin's gaze met mine. I've been in therapy for 2 years because of this. Learning to set boundaries. When I heard you were finally standing up to her, he hesitated. I want to help. I have records, receipts, everything. As we talked, a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying began to lift. I wasn't alone in this. Victoria's manipulation had affected the entire family, and perhaps by standing up to her, I was helping more than just myself. At our age, Kevin said as we parted, we finally understand how precious time is. I've wasted too much of mine cleaning up after Vicky. The digital battlefield. Family fallout. The lawsuit filing was like dropping a stone into still water. Ripples of chaos spread outward immediately. Victoria took to social media and family group chats with remarkable speed. Just wanted everyone to know that Liz is suing me over a simple misunderstanding about a loan. Can you believe it? After everything I've been through. She's just jealous that I'm trying to maintain my appearance while she's given up. The responses flooded in. Her friends were outraged on her behalf. Richard's cousins expressed shock. My mother-in-law called within hours, her voice tense with disapproval. Elizabeth, what is this I'm hearing? Why would you sue Victoria? We're family. I stood in my kitchen, dinner preparation forgotten as I gripped the phone. She stole $12,000 from me, Margaret. Money I'd saved for 20 years. Well, surely this can be settled privately, she insisted, her voice taking on the placating tone she'd used for decades. Victoria's going through a difficult time. I tried to settle it privately, I replied, surprised by my own calm. She made it clear the money was gone, and she had no intention of paying it back. The silence stretched between us, laden with unspoken accusations. Finally, Margaret sighed. You know how sensitive Victoria is. This could devastate her. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about the Reynolds family dynamic. Victoria's feelings would always matter more than anyone else's, more than my lost savings, more than Kevin's sacrifices, more than Richard's stress-induced high blood pressure. I'm sorry you're upset, I said finally. But this is happening. Victoria needs to face consequences for once in her life. After I hung up, Richard emerged from his workshop, sawdust still clinging to his shirt. He'd been building bookshelves for a cafe that might never open. That was your mother? He asked. I nodded. Let me guess, he sighed. She took Vicky's side. She always does. Richard crossed the room and wrapped his arms around me, the scent of pine and varnish enveloping us both. Not everyone is taking her side, you know. Kevin called me. Told me everything. I looked up, surprised. He did? 25 years we've been married, and I never knew the extent of it, he said, his voice tight. All those times she borrowed from him, from our parents. I feel like an idiot. You wanted to believe the best of her, I said softly. That's not being an idiot. That's being a good brother. Well, not anymore, Richard said firmly. I'm with you in this, Liz. All the way. The courtroom, day of reckoning. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, more intimate, which somehow made it more intimidating. Victoria sat across the aisle, looking polished and composed in an outfit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. When she caught my eye, she mouthed something that looked like, not too late to stop this. But it was too late. Too late for easy forgiveness. Too late for family loyalty to override justice. Diane presented our case methodically, laying out the deception with clinical precision. Text messages where Victoria begged for help with urgent medical bills. Bank records showing the transfer. Social media posts revealing cosmetic procedures and shopping sprees dated days after. Victoria's lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, tried to argue the money had been a gift. Mrs. Parker has helped family members before. This was simply generosity she now regrets. When my turn came to testify, I felt strangely calm. This wasn't just about money. It was about standing up for myself after decades of acquiescence. Mrs. Parker, Victoria's lawyer, began. Isn't it true you've helped other family members financially without expecting repayment? Yes, I admitted. But they didn't lie about why they needed help. Victoria specifically claimed medical emergencies and potential eviction. And you never considered this might simply be a misunderstanding? I thought about all the misunderstandings over the years. The borrowed items never returned. The promises never kept. The subtle put-downs disguised as concern. This wasn't a misunderstanding, I said firmly. It was a deliberate deception. And it's part of a pattern. That's when Kevin's evidence was presented, years of similar emergencies, thousands of dollars given and never returned. Victoria's face drained of color as her brother's testimony damned her in a way mine alone never could. She told me our mother needed specialized care, Kevin testified. I later found out she spent the money on a vacation to Bali. By the time the judge called for deliberation, Victoria's composure had cracked completely. For the first time in her life, her actions had consequences she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out of. The verdict, when it came, felt like vindication and sorrow all at once. Victoria would have to repay the full amount, plus legal fees. The family would never be the same. As we left the courthouse, Richard squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Liz. This took real courage. I watched Victoria storm to her car, already on her phone, no doubt spinning the story to whoever would listen. It doesn't feel like courage, I admitted. It feels like I broke something. No, he said firmly. You didn't break anything. You just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. Epilogue, second chapter. 2 months after the court case, I stood inside an empty storefront just off Main Street. Afternoon light filtered through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The space had good bones, hardwood floors beneath the worn carpet, high ceilings, a small courtyard out back perfect for outdoor reading. What do you think? The realtor asked. It needs work, but the location is excellent. I ran my hand along the wall, imagining bookshelves filled with carefully curated volumes. A coffee bar in the corner. Comfortable chairs where people could lose themselves in stories. It's perfect, I said, feeling a certainty I hadn't experienced in years. Victoria had made the first court-ordered payment last week. It wasn't the full amount, that would take time, but it was enough for the first month's rent and security deposit. Later that evening, as Richard and I sat on our back porch watching the sunset, I showed him the lease I'd signed. You did it, he said, his smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. Second chapter is really happening. It is. I agreed, still somewhat amazed. Though the family hasn't been the same. Victoria had moved to Florida, claiming she needed space from toxic people. Richard's mother was barely speaking to us. Kevin, on the other hand, had begun setting his own boundaries, refusing to fund any more of his sister's emergencies. Change is messy, Richard acknowledged, but necessary. He took my hand. You know, watching you stand up for yourself. It made me realize how much I'd been compromising too. Not just with Vicky, but with work, with my own dreams. I glanced at him, surprised. What do you mean? I'm taking that early retirement package, he said. The one I've been on the fence about. I want to focus on my woodworking. Maybe even make all the furniture for your cafe. The significance wasn't lost on me. For years, Richard had talked about leaving the construction company to pursue his passion for fine woodworking. Like me, he'd been putting it off, caught in the safe pattern of the familiar. Are you sure? I asked. He nodded. Life's too short to wait for the perfect moment. You taught me that, as the last rays of sun painted the sky in watercolor hues. I thought about second chapters, how they're often richer, more complex than the first. How sometimes you need to close one book firmly before opening another. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass in a toast. To standing your ground, Richard replied, clinking his glass against mine. In the distance, I could see the silhouette of downtown where my little storefront waited. Tomorrow I would begin transforming it, not just into a cafe, but into the legacy I'd always wanted to create. A place where stories mattered, where second chapters were celebrated, and perhaps most importantly, where I finally recognized my own worth.